Hello, hello, hello. I have got Dan Padavona.
Padavona. Yep.
Dan Padavona is joining us today, and I had specific ulterior motives for having you on this call, Dan. And I'm just going to jump right in. But first, I want to ask you my favorite question. And you guys, if anybody's listening to this, watching this, you know the rules, quirky questions only, nothing boring. I don't want to be looking on, I don't want questions you can find in a quick Google search. So, Dan, 10-year-old Dan, tell me about him.
Oh, 10-year-old Dan. I mean, he came from uh, a broken home. I know that's getting kind of cliche to say that these days, but I had a father who was very famous, and he had left us when I was in my single digits. And I think that at that point, I was really struggling without the role of a father figure, and I think I was also probably pretty enamored with the success that he had, but not seeing where I could find my own way in the world, my own path in the world. Ironically, as we started to come closer together when I got older, he passed in 2010, and then I didn't start writing until 2014. So he kind of missed all this.
So,
But I think,
did you
yeah,
do you think you had like nature nurture?
mhm.
Do you look back and see things about yourself and your personality that you inherited from your father without having been that close when you were very young? Or
I think a flair for the creativity, for certain, although he was a musician and I ended up being an author. Uh, but other than that, not not really. I mean, I think we both have a love for animals, but that's not exactly the most uncommon thing in the world. I just yeah, I just think fifth grade Dan, 10-year-old Dan was just on one hand a very typical boy who rode his bike everywhere and played baseball with his friends in the neighborhood. But I think inside though, Dan was kind of torn up and hiding a lot of his true feelings from other people.
wow. So, would you say he was determined and dreaming of the future? A lot of I'm going to do this, I'm going to succeed, or just living in the moment?
I think it was a lot of desperation and living in the moment and trying to find my place. I hadn't developed the skills yet to strike out on my own and build my own self-confidence.
And it must be intimidating having, because the way the world views you when you're growing up affects you. And if your father was famous, that must have really affected the what your perception of self.
It was strange. I mean, even as I got to be older in high school, I always had to be very careful about who my friends were and wonder about people's ulterior motives because so many people I didn't know would come out and come by and start like a conversation with me, and it would almost always lead to something about my father and can I get an autograph, or
Yeah.
and then I would realize, well, okay, this person really doesn't want to be my friend. So that not that I didn't make a lot of great friends in high school, I did, but there was a lot of trial and error and a lot of carefulness on my part trying to figure out, what people's intentions were.
I got a glimpse of that living in LA because it was, you felt like you were going crazy sometimes. You didn't really know when it was a real conversation or when it was work,
Yeah.
because most networking was work, you know.
That's the way SoCal has always struck me, is beautiful as it can be. There just seems to be there's a lot of plasticity, I think, in artificialness in that area, and a lot of people
Yeah.
climbing over each other to try to get to the top. And I think also, I'd use the word desperation again. There's a lot of desperation there. And strangely enough, I don't see that in a comparatively large city like New York City. Not that New York City doesn't have a ton of problems. I don't quite see that artificial quality that I see in SoCal. And I don't mean to denigrate it to such a degree, to say I don't like it, because I do, and I have a lot of people who live in that area who I care about very deeply. But
It's the
yeah,
nature of the city and the
it
industry, and
is.
the fact is that that's it there. But New York has a lot of New York can't hide the messiness that comes out in all aspects. And I think the messiness, our hearts need the messiness. And you do get away from it in LA, because even if it was there, everyone would pretend it wasn't, because it's Hollywood. We love Hollywood, but you know what I mean? Go to Hollywood
Yeah.
Boulevard. It's not like the movies.
Everything I'm saying here, I'm probably talking myself out of a future movie deal, but
No, but the thing is, I think that I don't have any, I lived there for years and I don't have any worries about that, because I think if when you do talk to an individual human being that's wanting to make your movie, that's wanting to network with you, that's an agent, they would be the first one to have this conversation with you. They're still human beings, but they all live in the little kind of bubble. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
So they have to be that way. I think if you get people alone,
yeah. Oh, by the way, I apologize to everybody out there. It is storming like crazy right now outside my windows, and it's just like it's loud. I don't know if people can hear it, but it's like freight train outside.
we can't hear the storm. There's a little bit, sometimes the mic I think is catching, and I think that might be because of the storm, but
Yeah, yeah, I think that's all
it's
that it is.
fine. It's fine.
Okay.
It's so okay, so this is what struck me. I am When a narrator first starts working, we initially go jump deep into the pool of ACX, and we start talking to indie writers, and and depending on our boundaries, sometimes the two, eager young narrator, eager first time writer, um, it can become quite emotional in a good way. And some of my dearest friends in the world were some of the first writers I worked with. But then the goal, as in, I think I'm learning now about writers and publishers. The goal is to work consistently with publishers. Once you start moving away from that, I got to a place where my heart was like, I need specific kinds of thrillers. This is, where my heart is. But when you're working for publishers, you do, and it's all good for you and it challenges you. So I started working back and looking at indie writers again. Um, and literally saying to them, I want to work, I will make space in my schedule, because I need to do the kind of work that I'm at the stage that I'll work for a little less right now to do a book I love and I feel, and something I've noticed, I really do have a point about this, and it's not to do with narrating, among the writers is there I have a dear friend that's in a job that, I mean, she's an amazing writer. And as an outsider, you look at it and you think, just write all day long. Oh my God, you'll make a fortune. But they feel trapped in a job. And I see all the writers on Twitter. This is my resource, I'll be honest. And they say, how do I query? What do I do? And I have a dear friend that amazing indie writer, and he's also very successful, and he's figured out the business side of it. And he says you've got to be careful if you go with publishers, because you have to make sure that they're going to back you and they're going to put money into it. Because if they just take you up and then don't do anything, and then your book fails, you're stuck. So I find it hard as an outsider to understand, I mean, I see how much fear and trepidation there is, how they're pouring their hearts, which I can't even imagine, onto a blank screen. I mean, we have a manuscript given to us, and it's hard enough, protecting our little hearts. And then hoping to be picked up by publishers. And I saw an agent. I swear I have a point, but it's all this I'm throwing at you, and I want to hear your take on it. I saw an agent the other day mention, I'm recently having an uptick of writers submitting to me, having already published indie, and that's not always the wisest idea. And why are they doing it? It seems like a minefield, and it's hard to see from the outside. I look at my successful writers like you and Landon Beach, and that are just look like they're just the boss on their own. Why do they then, is it not giving away their power to sell their rights? What is the whole publisher indie thing, and how do they make the choices? And how did you? Because you came from a completely different career and built, I mean, amazing. And I looked at your numbers on your blog post, and it's like, I've never seen anyone marry the business with the art that way. So please tell me your story.
Well, I have always been somebody who liked to control his own fate and do things on his own. So I naturally gravitated toward the idea of self-publishing. And then of course we all know the horror stories of incredibly talented writers who publishers turned down because they simply couldn't see the forest for the trees. I mean, J.K. Rowling, how many rejection notices did she get before she finally sold Harry Potter to somebody?
So why
And
keep
who,
going for a publisher and not just publishing on her own?
maybe because that was the only world she knew.
Okay.
I don't know, but publishers, by not by the day, I mean by the minute, are losing more and more ground and power in this industry because a lot of people are onto the game. Who in their right mind wants to give up all the rights to their books for a dirt cheap commission, and maybe they'll publish the book in a year or two. Maybe they'll decide to do an international deal, or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll promote it well, maybe they won't. And by and large, too, and this is something which I always tell people when I do my blog posts, and people ask me, what about the advantages of being with a publisher who can get your name out there? And what I try to tell them is unless you are J.K. Rowling or James Patterson or Dean Koontz, nobody's going to do jack for you. You are expected by the publishing house to do your own social media, to do your own promotion, maybe even to run your own and pay for your own advertising campaigns. So if you're doing all this work already, what really are you getting by giving up all these rights and going with a dirt cheap commission when Amazon is saying, come with us, to publish on your own, 70% commission, you can pretty much keep all your profits. Basically you're just paying us to put the book on on the website. And when I see something like that, it's such an easy choice for me. And I think that the people who it is an easy choice for are kind of stuck in the past and are believing, the lies that the only way to the top is to get Penguin Random House or somebody to pick you up.
But
I mean, look,
you brought up a really good point. Sorry to interject, but
no,
because
go
I
ahead.
have this feeling my mother had the dream of writing a book. And I feel
Mhm.
like a lot, and just I've got to stand here. I love publishers more than anything in the entire world, by the way, just for the record. City published, but it's the writer and their choice. It's really, I wonder how many of them have that. It's like the college thing. It's completely changed now, the degree thing, right? What a degree means as far as like getting work. Maybe in their heads, do you think it's a perception that to be a real writer, I have to have been given the stamp of approval?
I think your analysis is correct, and I think that your comparison is dead on with college because the economics of college for a lot of people no longer make any sense,
Yeah.
quite frankly. I mean, my son and daughter both have degrees, but they went to, well, went to a New York State school, so stayed in state and got in-state tuition, which was expensive compared to what I paid, but nowhere near, the cost of a private school. And my daughter went out of state, but she got in-state tuition from because she got a scholarship, and she ended up even paying less than my son did. So for them, I think it was a fair deal.
Okay.
But when you're paying 200, 400 grand over the course of 4 years, do you really expect to make that back anytime soon,
And,
if
and they
ever?
have interest on the loans. It's like,
Exactly.
it's,
Exactly. And it's adding up. And so, yeah, I think that there are a lot of people who need that rub in the writing industry, who believe that the only path to success is through a big name publisher. And I want to be clear about it. If the right publisher came to me and gave me the right deal, I would accept, because I
yeah.
know who I respect in the industry, and I know the terms that I would be looking for, and I know the advantages that those types of companies would be able to give me.
That's what
But
my
I'm
other
not
indie
under,
writer friend said. He said that
yeah.
I know what to ask for now. So
Mhm.
nobody, no, I don't think anybody thinks or says, oh no, I don't want, I mean, just as in a narrator, just
Mhm.
because I say indie books are valid and wonderful, of course I would take, call me with a pub job, I'd take it, right? If
Yeah.
somebody calls you up and says, "Oh my God, I want to publish these books," I just had that happen to a writer of mine recently.
Mhm.
Of course, take it.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Mhm.
but you take it with knowledge, right?
Yeah, you do. And the leverage of starting with self-publishing is incredible, because now you have the information that you need to decide whether or not a publishing deal is right for you.
Okay.
And also, you have the leverage of having proven success as an indie author, that people will come looking for you. I do have publishers that come looking for me a few times every few months. It's not a wave of them, but they do. And so far, I've come close a few times to saying yes, but every time so far, I've ended up saying no, because they just can't beat what I have.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm making an educated decision. And again, it's having power, it's having leverage, and it's having already proven that I have the marketing skills and the writing to push my books out to a lot of readers and build a fan base.
Well, okay, so that brings me to the big question. You were doing an entirely different job. How, what was that transition like? And what was your confidence level like when you started? And I'm saying this specifically for the Twitter writers that might see this, that are posting, not feeling like they're ever going to have a chance, like they're screaming in the dark. Were you ever that person? Who were you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody out there who doubts that they can do this, believe me, I was there. I was there for a long time. And also, I did not get in during the quote unquote Kindle Gold Rush era, where a lot of, people like um, Jay Conrath and Hugh Howey, broke in during like 2012 to 2014, when there were relatively few authors still, available in the self-publishing business. And not that they aren't brilliant, they are brilliant and they deserve their success, but there was so much less competition then. But the prevailing thought now among so many writers, self-published writers, is, well, you can't do it anymore, because then it was easy. Now it's too hard. There are too many books, blah, blah, blah. Um, so I didn't start writing until 2014. I did not find the genre that was special to me until 2019. So I wrote horror for 5 years with almost no success at all, except for when I had like a BookBub deal or something like that.
Ooh, if
And
you ever
then,
want one of their horror ones, I didn't know you
oh
wrote
yeah,
horror.
oh yeah, definitely, definitely. But then I hit 2019 and I decided to switch into very dark thrillers, psychological thrillers, dark serial killer thrillers, and that was the tipping point for me. It wasn't only because I had picked like a hot genre, and those are hot genres, but the key was I loved what I was doing so much more than I loved what I was doing with horror. Not that I
Right.
don't love horror, but when you embrace that darkness on a daily basis, day after day after day, it can be a bit much.
Yeah.
And it was becoming a bit much for me. And now as I moved into thrillers, I was talking about families and I was talking about friendships and I was talking about relationships and so many different things, so many different areas of life that I could look at and inspect in my stories while still having this heart pounding thriller going on in the background. And
That's
that
why
seemed
that's
to
why your
be,
characters feel like friends.
yeah. And
Yeah.
when I first started on this journey, I mean, it was a risk. I didn't know if that would work at all because it felt like, wow, I'm including some very different genres here. But it seems to be that that is what has separated me from a lot of other authors, and why readers like me is because they feel so tied to the characters and the
Yeah.
relationships.
So, but how did it look like business wise in the beginning? Did you have
Oh,
a steep learning curve marketing wise? My heart breaks for the writers that I know that have written one good, really wonderful, good quality book, and then it feels like silence, and I can literally hear it in, how dejected they become.
yeah. Yeah, and I went off on a tangent there. I apologize to everybody because I was going to answer that question.
I love
Uh,
tangents. We do tangents well here.
I'll go back in time a little bit farther to the early 1990s. I was out of college. I was out of a job. Um, going back to the whole college doesn't certainly doesn't guarantee a job thing. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And I fell in love with meteorology because I was fascinated with severe storms and tornadoes and things like that. And that really fueled me. And I said, boy, if I could just get a job in the National Weather Service, that would be perfect. And I would do that for the rest of my life, no question. Well, I got in 1995. By 1996, I was already like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, it was, I love the people I worked with, most wonderful people in the world. I had so much in common with them. The job itself was fascinating, even though it was frustrating. The shift work would kill me. I mean, we'd work days, the next week we'd work evenings, the next week we'd work midnights, and then we start all over again.
Yeah,
And I
Kim
did
says,
that.
be careful what you wish for.
Yes.
Yeah.
21 years I did that. No, 20, 26 years I did that, to the point where my health was starting to degrade. But when I started to write in 2014, it was just like, if I could sell enough books to maybe pay for like a heating bill or something, that would be great, or buy us pizza on a Friday night. I never dreamed that I could like make a living with that, let alone like blow away my current income. And even when we got to 2019, when I was changing genres, I still didn't see that. I didn't see that light at the end of the tunnel at all. I was just hoping again that I could maybe start making a few $100s a month consistently and not have to worry about advertising as much.
And you were
And
still working at the Weather Service
yeah,
and you were paying for
yeah.
advertising. Where were you
Hmm.
going? Were you taking classes on how to advertise? Were you just figuring it out as you went along?
I took one course on advertising from Mark Dawson, his Ads for Authors course. I'd recommend it to anybody. He goes a lot more into depth than I do as far as like different advertising. I'm an Amazon advertising person, so when I write a course, I focus on that. But he goes into Facebook and all these different things. And what I do what I believe in is that you should try everything that is suggested to you when it comes to marketing,
Okay.
and then toss out the stuff, cut out the stuff that doesn't work for you very quickly, and double down on the things that do. Now you have to give everything a fair shot, but I found that, like, social media is important and you have to make some posts to social media and stay in touch with your readership. But it wasn't like something that was like driving my sales. So, that was out as far as like, should I be posting 6 to 8 times a day? No, I should be making like a post a day or a post every 2 days.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be taking up my time. That's not where the money's coming from. Should I be focusing on Facebook ads? No, I mean, I do well with Facebook ads, but not nearly as well as I do with Amazon ads. So eventually I got to the point where I saw what was working for me, and I just kept leveraging that and leveraging that and leveraging that. And I built a readership. It took me about, I would say, a year and a half and 10 novellas. This was the Scarlet Bell FBI series, and they were all like short 100-page books, which again was a risk too. I didn't know how people would respond to the length, and people really liked them too. And I didn't like make a lot of money off of those books, but I built a foundation of readers. And then when it came time to switch to my Darkwater Cove series and introduce that, now I kind of had a small launch pad. And I got a lot more people involved in a hurry with that series.
Where was
The
the engagement
advertising.
happening? I'm interrupting you again.
No, go ahead.
Were they engaging with you on social media, on your website? Where was that engagement taking place?
A little bit on social media. It was more through my email list, as people would find me through these Amazon ads, and they would buy my book. And I was smart about one thing from the beginning, was that I took the advice that a very smart author had given me, and that is to put a link to your newsletter in the front of the book and in the back of the book, right after the story ends, so that they're guaranteed to see it. And then give them a reader's magnet, something to sweeten the pot to get them to sign up. It could be like some special artwork you had done that they could use as like a screen background. It could be like a character sheet, maybe a dossier on one of your characters. Like I write thrillers, so it could be something on Logan Wolfe or something like that. I chose to write another novella. I wrote a prequel to Darkwater Cove, which would only be available to my email list. It would not be available to Amazon people or anywhere else.
That's
and
smart.
Yeah, so I would just get these signups, and people would write me and say, "Oh, are you going to keep the series going?" Yeah, sure. Yep, it's coming out on X date, and that's how I was building, building readership and building engagement was through just targeted ads on Amazon, which led to book sales, which led to newsletter signups. And it's a snowball. You just need to get it moving. And once you get it moving, things kind of take care of themselves pretty quickly.
At what point did you think, oh, I could quit this job now?
Probably
was
when
it
I
a hard
started.
leap? Were you ready when you did it?
Oh, I was ready. In fact, I was kicking myself for not doing it sooner.
Really?
Yeah, I got to about book 6 in the Darkwater Cove series, and I realized at that point that I had almost replaced my income. And that was profit. That was real profit, not revenue. That was like, take all my revenue, subtract out all of my ad costs and marketing and stuff that I did, my website costs, everything. And I was just a hair below my total salary for the National Weather Service. So I remember saying jokingly to my wife at one point, "Boy, if I ever replace my income, I think I'll retire early." She goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And I was kind of like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." It's a joke at that point.
But it's a
And
shift
then
in
when,
identity, because I remember when I started narrating, I kept
yeah,
running off and trying to, even though I'd left my corporate job, I kept trying to get these like part-time jobs. And my accountability partner
mm-hmm.
said to me one day, she said, "Daniela, you make more per hour narrating. Why do you keep going off and taking these jobs?" I'm like, I can't. And when I quit, it was like everything was when I just admitted I was a narrator.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so you admitted you were a writer.
Yeah,
You just got out of your own way.
yeah. And and I'll expand on that too from my own standpoint. But you're aware of this. I mean, then I released the Wolf Lake thrillers, and eventually signed you as a wonderful narrator.
My
And
heart.
if
Those
you
books are my heart.
if you haven't listened to them, you should absolutely listen to them. Daniela absolutely knocks it out of the park.
It's
So
Thomas. It's the character.
in
It's what you
LeVar,
do. And I
Scout,
think what you said earlier, I'm interrupting you again, but
go ahead.
you bring family and friends in. When I read a thriller, yes, I want to know who killed who, but I want to care. A lot
Yeah,
of them you don't care. Why do I care about this person? It's female detective, you
you
know,
know
friendly
something that
sidekick number two.
and this even goes past thrillers, and I try to write dark thrillers where I kind of scare people a little bit. Um, Listen to somebody like Stephen King talk or Dean Koontz talk about horror. They both say in their writings that the key to scaring people is to first make them have stakes in the character, to care about the character. Otherwise, who cares? You just killed a nameless face,
But it
or a
has to be
faceless
your
character.
voice as well, because I recently,
Yes. Mhm.
I'm so naive and stupid that it's taken me so long to like clock on to this, but there's a famous best-selling writer that hasn't, they just like, it's not necessarily them writing it. They're so big that people buy their name. And I felt betrayed. But then I also thought, but wait a minute, I haven't read them in years because they lost that thing that I loved. And there's an author, I'm not going to say the name because, the person that she died and she handed over her work and worked closely with the person that's going to be doing it. I can't. It's gone. It was her. You know what I mean? Wolf Lake
Yeah.
Thriller wouldn't be the same if you weren't the one writing it, if you got so big someone else wrote it.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that too. And that's why I can't imagine hiring a ghostwriter because I take so much pride in what I do and I love what I do so much. But yeah, I mean, I was a few books into Wolf Lake, and not only had I eclipsed my salary, but I was closing in on double my salary.
I love
And
that.
that's when I told my wife, it's getting real now. Why am I working? Why am I putting my body through these shifts? I know what I love to do, and it's so much more cost effective for me to do what I do. So, is it time? And of course, we all are conditioned either by our parents or society or whatever to say, no, you need a stable job and somebody who's taking care of you.
Yeah.
Knock, knock. People aren't taking care of you. They'll fire you and get rid of you as soon as they need to cut, for
Yeah.
profits. Um, so, I had more protection because I work for the government, but still, it was like there's just no reason for me to accept half the salary and work twice the hours, including my birthday, holidays, weekends, overnights, all that crap, when I could make this wonderful living.
And
So I gave him
ironically, you're
notice.
safer as a freelancer. That's what people don't
Yeah,
understand because the
absolutely.
knowledge and the skill is in you, so you are in control, so you can make
You
it work
got
in
it.
another way at any time.
Yes, you got it. Um, and then again, like I said earlier, I was kicking myself because I waited so long to retire. I gave notice in June to leave in September of 2021.
Wow.
And by the time that September 2021 had rolled around, not only was I just crawling the walls trying to get away from this job, I had gone from making double my income to triple my income. Now I really felt like a fool for having to go into work.
Yeah.
And, so anybody out there who thinks that it can happen and it can happen in a hurry, believe me, I've been there. Believe me, I was that author who couldn't sell books. I'm not much of a Twitter following. What do I have, like 2,000 people on my Twitter? I mean, it's no big deal. I think there's maybe like 2,000 people following me on Facebook. It's not a big deal, but I make a huge living because I acquired skills in marketing to ensure that I control my own destiny for getting my name out there. And I'll give you an example too you mentioned, a writer who was absolutely, wrote a wonderful book, and then it was like they just disappear. And it's like, is there going to be another book? Is anybody ever going to find out about this person, this author? There's a wonderful person who I got to know. I was so lucky to get to know her in my life. I wish I had gotten to know her better. Her name was Dawn Lee McKenna, and she was a wonderful thriller writer. God rest her soul. Cancer took her. She wrote a book, I believe it was called See You, and it was a love story. And it was the first thing she had written for a long time, was the only thing that she had written. And she couldn't sell it to save her life. And then she started hanging out in writing forums and talking to people who were a lot smarter than me, and very accomplished. And she learned to do the things which I eventually learned to do. And pretty soon, she switched into like local thrillers set along the coast of Florida. Uh, and hers were very much similar to mine in that they had strong relationships, characters you cared about. And I think her book series went about 10 before we lost her. But she literally, like overnight, went from never heard of her to one of the most respected indie authors ever. And it was because she learned about marketing, and she learned how to value her books, and how to hire the right cover designer and put out a great product which people would love. And it didn't take long at all for her, and it didn't take long at all for me once I figured it out. And luckily I had people like her who were, you know, you know, were setting examples that I could look up to. So anybody who's out there thinks it can't happen, you absolutely can make it happen. And I recommend learning more about marketing, and especially now more than ever before, because Amazon's becoming very much a pay to play storefronts. And that you used to be where, like, you'd look at a book from Stephen King, I'd use him as an example again, and you'd look up The Shining, and then right under that book would be like a list of like a dozen books that people who bought The Shining.
Right.
And that would be like the way that other authors would get discovered. That would sell a lot of other Stephen King books, of course, because a lot of people obviously bought Carrie and Salem's Lot, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a great discovery tool. It only shows up on some pages now and then, and it's usually far down the page, and everything below the book now, sponsored ads. So
I
we
noticed
could
that for
all,
weird things as
oh yeah,
well.
we could all, like, as authors, we could all pull out our hair and say it's not fair, and
Yeah.
maybe it isn't fair. Or we can say, this is ridiculous that they want all this money. I'm gonna go wide. I'm gonna sell my books through Barnes and Noble or Apple or whatever, or Google Play. Well, another knock knock. It's only a matter of time before they do it too, because Amazon is making boatloads of money by
Yeah.
by this concept. But
There's an
instead of
element of
complaining about it,
accept the monster you're fighting and learn how to fight better.
yeah, learn how to conquer it,
Yeah.
because now, and I'm all about positivity. I'm all about looking at things, on the glasses half full side. So the way I see it is there are there's so much less competition for me to deal with now, despite all these indie books who keep coming out, because there are so few authors who are A, unwilling to advertise, or B, unwilling to learn how to do it profitably. Because if you learn how to do it profitably, you're going to beg Amazon to take your money. And I do. I raise my budget high enough. They won't take any more of my money. I'm maxing them out every day because my keywords are only, their keywords are only showing my books like so many times per day. Is just, you hit a limit at a certain point. So yeah, I mean, if you can build where other authors are just complaining about the current system. I believe that the path to the top is faster now than it has ever been. You just have to acquire the skills.
Okay, so that brings me to what did that look like? I'm assuming because I think you've got some, and maybe it's because of that job. I mean, the job probably served the purpose of giving you some kick-ass work ethics. I mean, to have been writing and doing that full-time job with those shifts, what did that look like? And then what did schedule-wise look like the mix when you went full-time writing between writing slash marketing?
Yeah, so obviously life got a lot easier when I retired. But when I was working, and remember, I stated I built my salary to 3 times my work salary through writing. Um, I was working a 9 hour day. I'd add about 45 minutes of commuting. That's a good estimate. So it was a different shift every week. So some days I was working in the afternoon, so I'd wake up and I'd write for an hour or two, and then I'd go into work, or I'd work during the day, come home, work for an hour or two, or God forbid I was on midnight shifts and dragging myself. But when I got up during the day, I just forced
But
myself
the
to write
brain
for an hour
loves
or two.
routine and repetition. Did you not suffer um, brain fog mentally? Like, I think I'd feel like I was
Of
going
course.
crazy working that kind of schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I was experiencing brain fog even before I started like writing every day.
Right.
But the point was, I wanted it so badly at that point that to quote Eric Thomas, I wanted success as a writer almost as much as I wanted to be able to breathe.
I
Uh,
love that.
and and it's because I wanted to escape this situation. I mean, why am I doing this to my body? Why am I shortening my lifespan? And why am I putting myself in a position where every day comes down to the last minute? I don't want it to be that way. But
I'm going to interrupt you one more time. Can I
go ahead.
ask you?
Mhm.
I recently realized that I went through 10 years of hell in a job that changed me as a human being, like literally
Sure.
changed me. It made me
Mhm.
an unhappy person that was always bracing myself to just force my way through.
Mhm.
And I just realized that I left the job, but I now have to retrain my brain to be happy again and not always see the first something's gonna. Did you have to go through a period where you literally had to retrain yourself to change the way you thought? You become indoctrinated when you have a job and you're just fighting to keep going.
Yeah, and this is something you should be doing even if you're still working full time and writing it on the side. Uh, After I retired, I had a very troubling doctor's appointment where they found that my blood pressure was shooting up, which scared the hell out of me because I've always maintained a pretty good physique. I've always stayed in pretty good shape, exercised, ate fairly well. So it taught me that I had to get a lot more serious about how I ate. And uh, the first thing I got into was self development. And every day, and this is going to be for the rest of my life, I work on self development. I meditate. I'm very intentional about how I approach people, how I approach situations, and my goodness, it sure lends to my writing because I always had this positivity that was trying to get out, and
Yeah.
now it's just like it's really flowing through my characters, and I love it. And I see it more in everyday life and the way I communicate with people, not just the way like LeVar communicates with people in my head.
I love
You
LeVar.
know,
Best character, all right? Best
yeah,
character ever written in any book anywhere. Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
But you're right. I mean, it was a total retraining, and it was realizing that boy, it took a while for me to realize that no, I can calm down. I'm not really up against the clock that much anymore. I can chill, so maybe I was working on about 2 hours a day on my writing business while I was writing full time or working full time. When I retired, I actually increased to 4 hours a day in my writing business because I had more hours in the day. So now I'm putting more into marketing, more into blogging, thoughtful social media posts, networking, those types of things,
So as
working with,
opposed to writing, like what
yeah,
percentage was actual writing? What percentage was the business side?
now it's 50-50. It's about 2 hours
Really?
each. Yeah, it's about 2 hours each. And I find that, actually, no, I'd say it's a little bit more on the business side. I'd say it's about an hour and a half writing, 2.5 on the business side. And I love it that way. The writing is just strenuous enough that by the time I'm done, I'm like, whew, that was good. I got everything written. I can kind of chill now and kind of let my brain relax. And then it's just, working on marketing or working on my website or, trying to make things better, sending out an email to my subscribers. But really, past that 4 hours, I got the rest of the day to myself. I can go for a nice long bike ride. I can go for a jog and go for a walk in the woods. I could take my dogs out and hang out with my wife. I can talk to my kids. It's just all these wonderful things that I said, boy, if I could just get away from my job and I would have all this time, I'd love to be able to do these things. And now I can. But it took me a good 9 to 12 months to figure out that I could, because there was still this part of me, there's still something in my brain that was saying, no, you're out of time. Work, 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 hurry, hurry, hurry. And, what I found was psychologically, I was filling my day with other stuff that I didn't need to be doing. That I was creating busyness where it didn't need to occur. Like, I would go down the social media rabbit hole. I would go down the YouTube rabbit hole,
Yeah.
and
Easily
I'm
done.
wasting time there. Absolutely. I get stuck in front of the tube watching Netflix for watching like 10 straight episodes of this or that,
And
or
it's
I'm
always
watching the
cleverly timed
news.
so that you think if you
Oh
just hang
yeah.
on for one more episode, you'll see what happened. Who I just watched one, there was no ending. They canceled the show. I literally
Gosh.
binged 30 episodes,
That's
no
killer.
sleep, and they cancel. It's purposeful. It's like a drug.
But
It
I also
is.
learned a ton about cliffhangers from writing from watching Netflix. And just to be clear, I don't do cliffhangers at the end of books because that just absolutely drives me nuts. It's a
Yeah.
terrible thing to do
And it
to
drives
your
the readers
readers.
nuts too.
Yeah, it's like even if it's coming out in 2 months, they're like, still, why?
Yeah.
It's just a mean thing to do. But so I love to do cliffhangers from chapter to chapter. So okay, I end chapter 5 with this. Oh boy, that was wild. I better read chapter 6 now. I can't stop here. So
Yeah.
that's the way I love to write is to write like that, but to keep it within one book. But yeah, that was the problem with me, is that I psychologically filled my day meaninglessly, and now I've started to chill, and now it's like I'm a lot more relaxed. I'm pretty much off the blood pressure medications. I'm seeing my doctor again next month, and I think he's just going to be like, "You're done. Forget it. You're only on 5 milligrams. You can barely even sense it in your system, and
Oh,
your
that's
BP
good.
is
Oh,
still
because you're
low."
always
Yeah,
very fit and everything. I'm thinking about me sitting
yeah.
here like Netflixing away, no exercise at all. So, but do you have a certain word count per day or specific hours? I read a book once. I'm fascinated because I remember one famous writer. She sits there with like on her bed with like espresso bourbon and cigarettes every time she writes. Do you have a ritual, like a certain thing that you do that signals you're clocking in to write, or a certain time or word count? What's your ritual?
My ritual, now that I actually have my day to construct the way I want it to, is I'm a big believer in I still haven't read the book, but I'm aware of the concept, eat the frog. And eat the frog says, do the hardest thing first, do the most difficult thing first.
Yeah.
So, the frog is the most ugly looking thing on your plate, eat it first. So that's the way I do it. And I should preface that by saying I love writing, but it's difficult and it's challenging, and sometimes staring at the blank page can be a little bit intimidating. So I find that my routine is wake up, do a little bit of meditation, some affirmations about what I'm trying to accomplish in my life and the person who I want to be, kind of visualize where I want to be. This stuff only takes me like, 10, 15 minutes. Very quick exercise session, just enough to get my blood pumping, maybe a minute of journaling, again, which is probably includes like, sometimes it includes how I'm feeling. Most of the time it includes like goals I'm working on.
Tell me this
And
isn't
then,
like 5 in the morning, is it?
no, no,
I was gonna say because this.
yeah, I've thought about trying that, and I actually have done it in the past. I'm a 7 o'clock riser right now, which is just fine. It's perfect. My wife leaves for work at 7, and because she's gone for work, now the house is nice and quiet, and I can write.
Yeah.
And then I turn on a box fan, and it's just I love the white noise, and that kind of puts me into okay, it's time to write mode. And but things have actually gotten a lot more have gotten pretty different for me now that my routine has changed a little bit. I mean, basically from 2014 on, up until a few months ago, it was just pure white noise. I couldn't work without it. Even if I had to have headphones on, listening to a YouTube recording of a box fan, that's what I did. Uh, Now I've found that depending on what the music is, I can listen to music in the background, which is really cool because I love music. And sometimes it's cool. Like I'll just, I'm a child of the 80s. So I'll put on some 80s alternative and I'll just sit back and I got the Smiths and the Cure playing and I'm writing. And it's just, I'm just, throwback time and I'm having a good time. And so it brings more enjoyment to my writing. So yeah, those are the things that I do. It is kind of a routine, and I think it's setting the right mindset and just saying I'm going to do this and I'm going to get it done, and then I can work on the easier stuff
It's
afterwards.
totally a routine because you're setting the stage. No coffee? I always thought all writers had a nice coffee while they're writing.
Yeah, no, actually, it's green tea for me, which I guess is always Thomas
Yeah,
in the Thomas
yeah,
Shepard
yeah,
books. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, him and Aguilar are always on the green tea.
So
So yeah,
it's the dream. So
that's for
so
me.
really you've made the dream come true. And how
Mhm.
that has to have done wonders self-confidence wise.
It
Doing it
has.
for yourself. Do you know what I mean? That you figured it out and showed yourself you were capable of doing something, let's be honest, almost everyone dreams of. Not specifically writing, but learning to be their own boss, conquering their fears, figuring it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, and trust me, the readers who I've read who haven't made it, who I really like, they're just like a step away from doing what I'm doing. They really are that close. And it's just a matter of setting goals, believing in yourself. You know what? You don't even have to believe in yourself. Believe in the process. Believe that if you start working on this every single day, that you have a routine, that good things will come for you, and that you don't have to start with confidence. Because I didn't have confidence. Confidence is something that builds as you start to experience success. And then that's where all, the snowball that I mentioned with the readership growing, there's also a snowball with your own confidence in your own success. It is that, as soon as you start to experience success, now you're more willing to try these other things. Now you're writing faster, you're writing better,
Yeah.
you're taking more chances in your writing. You're believing in yourself more. And yeah, I mean, there's just so many people who I know who could totally do what I'm doing. All my friends on Twitter, on YouTube who write, on Facebook, I should say, they can all do this. And, I've read their stuff and I know that they have the chops. And I know that they're wonderful people too. It's just a matter of educating yourself and finding the know-how and knowing how to market yourself and get your books in front of people. Because there are 330 million people in the US alone and I think 7 billion people in the world or something like that. There is somebody out there who loves your genre. There are probably hundreds
Yeah.
and hundreds of thousands of someones who love your genre, even if you're into like unicorn horror.
I
There's
know. And there's
somebody out there who loves it.
you're talking, if there are any narrators out there, some of the, especially if you get into the realm of when
Yes.
you first start, everyone gets a pseudonym because you hear there's money in erotica, and there are some interesting subgenres they come up with that like blow the mind. But the thing is,
I
the Twitter
yeah.
conversation, though, I
Yeah.
find that it's wonderful that everyone is supportive, but I do find that it goes towards a collective voice of helplessness.
Yeah. And that's why I tend to say my piece on social media, and I try to put stuff out there that will help people. And I find it's give it or take it or leave it. It's not my job to inspire you, although it has become a passion of mine to give back.
You're a creator,
But
not a consumer. You
yeah,
create the energy.
yeah. There are
Constructive
people.
living. Have you ever heard of the psychological theory? I think the book is by David K. Reynolds, Constructive Living. Have you ever heard of that? It's what
No, but
it's your
explain to
whole
me.
philosophy. It's what you're talking about, that there's always the way through is through action, and that the universe is always presenting you with the next best step that you should take. And if you take that
Absolutely.
step, you don't have to figure it out. Just take the
Hmm.
step.
Oh yeah, whether you're talking about Tony Robbins or Brendan Burchard or just about anybody in the self-development community, they all have their own take on that same concept.
Yeah.
Is that it's there for you. The universe is showing you the path. In fact, there's this. It's called propinquity, if I pronounce that
I like
correctly.
that word, propinquity.
Propinquity. Yeah.
Propinquity.
So here's the idea. I own a blue Toyota Prius, which we bought in 2014. Before I bought this Prius, every once in a while I'd see a Prius on the road, and I was like, okay, yeah, I should probably buy one of those days because gas prices are going up. Finally bought a Toyota Prius after doing my research, and I swore the next day when I was out on the road, every block I saw a blue Toyota Prius.
Yeah, Tony
They
Robbins
were
talks about that, the
always
amygdala or
there.
something.
Yes, they were always there. It was just a matter of getting your mind to
Yeah.
recognize that they're there. So if you are spending time every day, maybe it's meditating, maybe it's self-affirmations or whatnot, talking to your self-conscious and explaining to yourself what it is that you want, you're very definitive about it. If you do this enough, you will allow your mind to recognize the opportunities when they show up in everyday life.
I
And I've
believe that.
seen it like several times this year already in my own life. It's like, okay, I'm trying to increase my income. I'm trying to hit this next level. How do I do it? Oh, here's this opportunity. Oh, I didn't know that person was into that. I know them really well. I should talk to them about it.
And
It's just
it's the
left and
main
right.
law of attraction thing. But the thing people don't
Sure.
understand is you're creating a way for you to see the path for you to take the action. They think if I just write this down, and also I've got a theory that, like, because when I was first made redundant from that job and other times in my life, when you go into the flow of being relaxed and confident and focusing, like, kind of on what's important to you and what you're doing right now,
Yes.
that's when you start to notice, like, somebody mentions a song and it comes on the radio that day, or you think of someone and they happen to call, because I think that you're loosening up your filters that we all have. Just only pay attention to this. I think
Mm-hmm.
you loosen them up. And like you say, then you create pathways. Except I
Well,
don't really create good pathways. I need to start.
the mind is so powerful. And yeah, if you are actively creating the right pathways, think of how many times you have subconsciously been brought back to a specific moment in your life that you hadn't thought about in years just because of a certain scent that you smelled or the
Yeah.
taste of a
Music.
certain food or anything like that, or even like the quality of the temperature and the humidity when you stepped outside in the morning. I mean, I've had it happen to me countless times. It's like, oh, I haven't thought about that in so many years. But now you're conditioning your brain to look for opportunities. And so that's what when I teach other authors, I push this so hard is to speak to your subconscious on a daily basis, but also to always be a learner, always be educating yourself, always be a marketer. Understand that writing isn't just art. If you want it to just be art, then just write a book and send it out to the world, and maybe your friends will love it. But don't think that anybody's ever going to see it. And that's
Yeah.
fine if that's all you want. If you
Yeah.
just want the the wonder of having written your own novel and gotten it out of your head, by all means do so. But if you want to sell that book, you need to admit that this is a business too. It's more business than art, or at least just as much business as art. And
Yeah.
if you're unwilling to embrace marketing, then you're never going to sell those books unless you get really lucky, unless you just go viral.
And it's like anything. I just realized that it's like anything. I could dress up in costumes and play around in my house and put makeup on all day long, pretend I'm one of those women in the Rockford Files, in the 70s. But
Mm-hmm.
until I go out in the world and make decisions about who I'm selling it to, who I'm presenting it to, it's just me playing in front of my mirror,
You bet.
right? So I
Yeah,
might
you
as well
bet.
make the best decisions if I'm going to go out and show the world, right?
Oh yeah. Uh, you've only have one life to live. You might as well live it the best as you can. And
Yeah,
you only have 24 hours in the day. And, if you're smart, you're getting at least 8 hours of sleep, 7, 8 hours of sleep every night. So in
as
those
opposed to
16 or 17
Netflix.
hours you have to yourself, yeah, you should be intentional.
Yeah,
You should be making the most of those 16 or 17 hours because, not that I want to be negative, but here's a powerful way to envision, to empower yourself, is to imagine yourself on your deathbed, and hopefully it's many many decades from now, and you look back at all the things that you said you were going to do and never tried,
yeah.
the job that you hated that you said you were going to leave and you never left, that career you said you would pursue but you never really tried, all those things that you wanted to try that you thought you would love and you never did. How will you feel? Or will you go to your deathbed realizing that you lived life to your fullest, and whatever you believe, if you believe you're going to God now, or now it's just time for the endless sleep, that you can go in peace because you gave your best. You gave your best life. And so that's also the way I think of myself, and the way, I try to talk to other authors. But yeah, I'm quite aware of the community of Twitter, of the community of Facebook, of the negativity, of the group think, of just dragging each other down, of no, it can't be done anymore. Even though
It's
that I can come
magnified
out,
insecurity because each person's hoping
yeah,
somebody will prove them wrong, but
mm-hmm,
nobody thinks they're the leader. That they're all soaking, and also the stories we tell ourselves. I think COVID did people a disservice in one way, although I'm the biggest fan, sorry, not of course of the repercussions, but I had such a great time, the whole world on the internet. But the thing about it is, we had a lot of time sitting there in our heads thinking of our
mm-hmm,
old stories. And I think that a lot of us gave ourselves the message that the story was written, that the best we can do is maybe get back to some of our glory years. What about your new story? What about your new changing your career, writing? What about writing your book?
mm-hmm,
I'm so bored with the whole, oh, it's too late thing. We're
yeah.
too smart for that these days.
Well, everybody who hears that or reads that also should feel empowered, because, like I said, with the whole thing on marketing, and so many people are unwilling to do it, there are so many people who have already given up, that
Yeah,
the competition is a lot less fierce than you think that it is. Just by taking daily actions and working at yourself, you are already ahead of 99.9% of the world, if not more. If
yeah,
not more. And I'd go even further, Daniela, to say that people don't want to be told when they're on Twitter or Facebook that there's a way out. That most people go online for
yeah,
affirmation,
yeah.
not for information. Uh,
Sad.
and it's like they want somebody to give them an excuse. They want somebody to tell them it's okay to throw in the towel, because I'm not getting it done either, and neither are all these other people, and they've given up. And here are all of the reasons why. here are all the things that are unfair in the world. Here are all the things
Narrators
that
are
are
doing
unfair
that
about
too.
Amazon. Absolutely.
There's an influx of narrators in the market, and a lot of people, although they're a very tight-knit community, and most narrators are extremely positive. You can't get that many rejections a day and not be a human, like super positive. But the
Yeah.
feeling of,
How many narrators are giving up right now because they
yeah,
believe that these AI
AI.
voices that are coming out are already better than they are? Or that how many writers are giving up because they think that AI can write books better than I can?
Yeah, and like,
Has
what have you
anybody
done
actually like,
today in your
yeah.
career?
And has anybody actually like faced that fear and tried it out to see how good it is? Because I actually have a subscription to ChatGPT. I actually have a subscription to an AI writing software too. And I look at this stuff all the time, and I find that it's great for generating ideas for what might happen during some point of a book. But asking it to write a book, oh my God, is it horrible? It is so cliched and so horrible that, well, I should post this sometime to a blog article just so people can see the output. And you would understand quickly, it's not even close. It's
So
not even
it's like
close.
working in a corporate office. Everyone was always, every time some new boss would come in, it was the end of the world. Every time something, and yes, over time, pensions got worse.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is the mistake you made is you expected this to be your golden meal ticket for the rest of your life. I'm not
Right.
saying, I'm not, I'm not playing lightly with something that's upsetting and scaring people, but I'm saying that we don't have time. We need to get
Mm-hmm.
better. Narrating
Yeah.
takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
How much time do you have to scroll? Get in
Yeah.
the booth.
And that's being intentional with your time. It's
Yeah,
anybody could write books like I do and put out as much output as I do because
yeah.
I did it when I had a full-time job. I was putting out 10 books a year. They were full. They weren't novellas. They were full novels. The entire Wolf Lake series was written inside of 12 months.
And how much time a day did you spend on Twitter while you were writing the Wolf Lake thriller series?
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. Exactly. And I still had a little bit of time to waste on Netflix. I still had a half an hour to watch Cobra Kai or whatever. So yeah, you need to be intentional with your time. If you really want this, you have the time to do it. I used his name earlier as an example, Mark Dawson, one of the most successful thriller indie authors of all time, and 100% self-made through marketing, self-taught through marketing. Wonderful courses, wonderful human being. I'd recommend him to anybody, both as a writer and as a teacher. Mark, when he was working full time in his dead end job, had to take a train to work every day, back and forth.
Oh God,
He
I
would write
have
on the
to.
train.
I
He
still
would
have
write on the
PTSD.
train. Oh, yeah. So by the time he got home, he'd already written his chapters because he did it. He was never wasting time. He was on that train, he was writing. If you perhaps have a long commute to work and there's like a bus that goes in that same direction or a train that goes in the same direction, could you, wouldn't that pay for itself if you could hand the driving over to somebody else and you just sat there in your seat and you just typed away and you got
And
that
also,
novel
what
out
are
of
you
your head?
doing to your brain when you're doing that? You're training your brain that what is important isn't the dead end job. What is important is the
Yes.
dream I'm working on this hour every day. You're
Yeah.
training your brain that there's a way forward.
Yeah. Now, I did everything outside of my job, but I'm telling you that there's a lot of people who could do it on their job too. I'm not saying double dip and write while your boss thinks you're
Yeah.
doing Excel
There's
reports.
so much
But what I'm
wasted
saying
time
is,
in corporate jobs. I'm sorry. There's-
how many people get like a half an hour or an hour for lunch?
How many
And
people spend hours at the coffee machine
yeah,
gossiping
that,
about fellow coworkers?
and instead of like eating at their desk and eating something healthy that they made the night before, they go out to Olive Garden or something god awful and they gossip and they complain about their job. And by the time they got back, it's 1 o'clock and it's time to work again. Whereas if they had stayed at their work site, they would have saved money. They could have written while they ate, and they would have had probably 2 chapters knocked out by the time 1 o'clock rolled around. So I mean, it's a matter of prioritizing and realizing that you do have enough time in the day if you're intentional about your work day. And I'm not telling anybody to quit their job, but I am saying that in very few exceptions, jobs out there are not very stable anymore. They're not very secure. Nobody's looking out for you. Nobody has your best interests in mind. They have their best interests in mind. You are working for them.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling you to quit, but if your dream is to write, you need to start working on that dream like right now, like before the end of the podcast. You should be thinking about how you're going to pull this off. And then if you can hit a level of income which you're comfortable with, which says, I'm ready to walk away, then you can do it. And whether that's a 6-month plan, a 6-year plan, or whatever it is, if you don't start today, it's always going to be an extra day into the future.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah,
it's the same
you
with
just need to
narrators.
start it.
Get a part-time job. If you don't have books, when I started, I got part-time jobs. All actors, because I came from an acting background, you get a survival job in between acting gigs.
Right.
Narrators, I hear them, they've got a dry spell and they're like, I'm going to quit. I can't do this. You're still a narrator. Go work at the local bar. You do what you have to do until the money makes sense and you stop doing it. But what you said about writers and working on your dream, if your dream is to be a writer and you're showing up every day at a corporate office and you're not writing ever, then you're spending your life working on someone else's dream.
You bet. That's exactly the way I would put it. You are working on somebody else's dream and making their dreams come true. They are not in the least bit interested in your dreams.
Yeah. Oh, this has been I knew I would love Dan Padavona. I loved you from the minute I read the Wolf Lake thrillers. Dan,
Thank you,
I'm going to
Daniela.
put you on the spot here, like I do everyone at the end of a call. Famous last words. If you could leave the YouTube audience that's going to be watching this in 60, 70, 80 years, if they come up with robots for the house, I'm getting one. I'm sorry, guys. Politically correct or not, I watched the Jetsons when I was a kid.
I have a Roomba. Does that count?
Okay, famous last words. One thought, if you could leave the writers and narrators, anyone watching this show, with take away one thing from this call, what would it be?
I would say the same thing that I end my podcasts with, which is to make it your daily mission to make somebody smile today. I think that just having that type of positivity of wanting to make other people happy will bring so much more joy and happiness to your own life, and that positivity will multiply itself thousands folds, if not millions folds, and all these dreams which you have locked up in your head. When you are wonderful to the universe and the universe is coming back being wonderful to you, you will become a more efficient person, a harder worker, and a better dreamer.
It's the old amygdala. I'm probably getting that word wrong, but thank you so much, Dan. I will put you guys, for anybody watching this video, I'll put a link to Dan's podcast in the About section below and his website and books on Audible. You don't want to miss them if you like thrillers. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful call. And I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Daniela. I
Thanks,
really appreciate it too.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. And thanks for writing LeVar.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
joining, everyone. Bye. Video will be up in 2 weeks, guys. Bye, Dan.